Edward October. The sound you hear is midnight in the powder room at the historic Club Paris. This is the start of Octoberpod. Don't worry, I'm not actually inside a women's powder room. I'm only narrating. Since it opened as a burlesque house in 1933, the gay and sophisticated Club Paris has always been one of the most elegant night spots in this city, a city which I will not name, by the way, though it is one of the most glamorous destinations in North America. Like many historic nightclubs, the Club Paris began as a brothel. And like all historic brothels, the Gaiety, which would later become Club Paris, had a dark past. Established in 1863, the Gaiety was a hotel and saloon that catered to workers from nearby mining camps. It quickly earned a name as a house of ill repute, which offered liquor and gambling downstairs and loose women upstairs. One of the sex workers at the Gaiety was a woman whose real name has been forgotten by time, but who is now known only as Madame Burlesca. Legend has it that she quarreled with one of her clients, a bandit running from the law and posing as a miner, who, after refusing to pay for her services, took his deer knife and skinned Madame Burlesca's face clean off. She eventually died of blood loss and infection, but her killer was never caught. In the years that followed, the ladies of the night working the Gaiety would often claim they'd seen the ghost of a strange, faceless woman, presumably Madame Burlesca, in the still hours of the night. The ghost was always crying, lamenting the loss of her face, and wanting to be beautiful once more. According to the legend, if you are a beautiful woman and see the ghost of Madame Burlesca in the mirror, she will snatch you up and steal your face. Even today, patrons of the Club Paris, patrons who've had no knowledge of its past as the Gaiety, have reported sightings of a faceless, crying woman. Many of the sightings have occurred in this very powder room, in which Madame Burlesca serviced her customers. No such spectral face swappings have yet occurred, as far as we know. But this place does have a reputation of women fainting and experiencing severe bouts of hysteria or fright. In 1996, a patron of this club is said to have had a psychotic break in the powder room, during which she smashed all of the mirrors, badly cutting her hand in the process, and screaming, "I need to put on my face!" There have been more than a few women who've attempted or completed suicide and acts of self-harm within these walls, and all of them were perfectly healthy, sane, seemingly well-adjusted, and stunningly beautiful ingenues in their 20s. The legend of Madame Burlesca is one of the many tales attempting to explain the link between the monstrous and the beautiful. During the intermission, I'll speak with Carissa Vikis, a YouTuber and podcaster who knows all about the ugly things people do for beauty. But for now, special guest host Autumn of the podcast Autumn's Oddities has something really groovy and extra spooky to share with you. You're listening to Octoberpod AM. Keep it right here.
Hey, welcome back to Autumn's Oddities. I'm Autumn. Today, I would like to tell you the tale of a woman minding her own business in the woods. And you can probably guess what happened. She became the town scapegoat, and eventually, the hysteria and ignorance of her neighbors took her life. Meade County, Kentucky is a small hamlet that packs a massive supernatural punch. In terms of dark tourism, this county boasts everything from sightings of Bigfoot, giants, a headless horseman, mysterious runes, and of course, a witch whose ghost still haunts the woods. If you ask someone what they think of when they hear the word witch, you're probably going to get a similar image. Old, haggard, ugly. She's got a bent nose with some warts on it, maybe. She's got a broomstick, and above all, female. But how accurate is this stereotype? Witchcraft, as we know from the episode that I did on witch trials, was a crime in Europe during what is generally referred to as the early modern period, that is, the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries. Different countries enacted different laws to deal with witches, but for the most part, by the mid-16th century, witchcraft was a secular crime, one that could be punished by imprisonment, pillory, or execution. During this period, approximately 90,000 people were formally accused of witchcraft, and about half of this number were executed. So that's 45,000 people executed after being accused of witchcraft or being a witch. So where do women come in? Well, it depends on what country you were in, but on the whole, women made up the vast majority of those accused and executed. In England, it's estimated that women made up approximately 90% of the accused. In the largely German-speaking Holy Roman Empire, this number was 76%. In Hungary, 90% again. In Switzerland, which, is supposed to be neutral, 95%. And in parts of France, 76%. There are exceptions to this trend, though. In Iceland, women made up only 8% of the accused, and low figures can also be seen in Russia, 32%, and Estonia, 40%. So they're equal opportunity accusers. But for the most part, and especially in Western Europe, women were far more likely to be accused of witchcraft than men. Witches were generally defined as people who made a pact with the devil in exchange for magical power to commit evil acts. They were believed to be in league with the devil, meeting with him at nighttime Sabbaths, pledge homage, engage in lurid sex, kill children, and maim pregnant women. They were also believed to make men impotent. Is that what we're going to blame it on? In some cases, by actually stealing their genitals and hanging them on trees, dicks and balls on trees. Can you think of anything more horrifying? I can't. As we well know from the Salem witch trials, arguably the most famous witch trials in the United States, anyone, and I mean anyone, could be accused of witchcraft. And then the burden, once you were accused, fell to that person to prove their innocence, which was typically a double-edged sword, a task designed to fail. They did the old water test. It's like, if we throw you in the water and you don't drown, you're a witch. So we're going to kill you because you're a witch. But if we throw you in the water and you do drown, then you are innocent, but you're also dead. So again, it's a task that is designed to fail. And in Salem, they also did, I believe it was the reading of Bible verses. If a witch read a Bible verse, there would be some sort of physical pain or something visible on her body that would happen for, her hubris in reading the Holy Bible. Anyone could accuse their neighbor of being a witch, and the accused were guilty until proven innocent. That is, of course, if you made it to any sort of trial before you were killed. And that was the very unfortunate fate of a beautiful, intelligent, gentle 22-year-old woman from Meade County, Kentucky in August of 1840. In 1818, Leah Smock was born near Battletown, and according to legend, her natural abilities could be used to cure the sick and see the future. She was said to be a beautiful and intelligent woman with dark hair and eyes, and many believed she had the second sight. And the only reason I'm commenting on her looks is I believe that made her more of a target. During the 1800s, of course, being beautiful and intelligent was already a threat, but add a strong intuition, and that made her a triple threat to those around her. And of course, the W word started flying around. They're like, oh, she's a witch. That combined with her alleged ability to see the future and natural herbal healing, put them together and what do you got? A burning. Battletown in Meade County has nothing to do with war, as the name might imply, and instead refers to, quote, an afternoon-long and inconclusive fistfight between two residents. Happens every day. That was either about the name of the post office or maybe a woman. Lapland in Meade County boasts a rich and haunting history that reaches back to 7000 BC when it was inhabited by Native Americans. In Meade County, there were no indigenous inhabitants, though. Instead, it held sacred significance as a hunting ground and burial site. The land was deeply revered, and its care was a matter of great importance. In the heart of the county stood a sacred oak tree, its colossal branches reaching towards the heavens. This tree was said to be the dwelling place of the spirits and a portal to another realm. It was beneath the shade of the tree that the Cherokee gathered to share their stories and pass on their timeless wisdom. And it was on this sacred land that Leah's family made their home. The oldest of three children, Leah finished school early because she had already surpassed her teacher's knowledge. The teacher's like, I can't teach you nothing else. Get on out of here. You're making me feel stupid. She went on to learn from her own environment, which included ways in which livestock and other animals could die from eating poisonous plants. And she tried to warn the people around her, but of course they refused to listen. They were like, you're a woman. They're like, why are all of our cows dying? We don't know. Despite the town being suspicious of Leah, she did have some close friends, and it was even rumored that she was in love in the later summer of 1840. Leah spent her days wandering the dark Lapland woods in what is now Meade County, like I said. She had a Native American friend named Indian Joe, don't love that, who made her a walking stick with the head of a snake coming out of the top, which will come up again later. Some believe Joe taught her which plants had healing properties, as was taught by the Cherokee that remained in the area after the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Wow. What a lovely whitewashing of a fucking genocide. I mean, that's what that was. They marched indigenous people to random places in the middle of nowhere, stole their ancestral and sacred land, and they're like, let's just call it the Indian Removal Act. Okay, cool. Nice sterilization of it. In a strange series of incidents, her father was involved in a land dispute with one of the neighbors. Some man, some bigwig from the city, came over and sold the land that Leah's family owned, not once, but twice, just with fake deeds and whatnot. You know, there was really no way to check back then. You could go to City Hall and check, I guess, if they had one. With the town's attention already on the Smock family's land troubles, word spread throughout town that Leah was casting spells on people and animals. One day, Leah was said to have been told that she was not allowed to hold a baby, and the next day, the baby died. Something similar happened when she was forbidden to pet a horse. She went ahead and petted the horse anyway, and it ended up dying later. But there are two versions of those stories. One said that Leah cursed the baby and the horse out of spite, and the other claims that she felt something was wrong with them and wanted to help heal them. Other legends suggest that Leah controlled area crops, give me a break, and those who weren't on her good side would not have a plentiful harvest. All of that to say, the town decided to use Leah as a scapegoat for each and every hardship they faced, even though they could be very easily explained by things like, I don't know, lack of medical care and, lack of any knowledge of local flora and fauna poisoning livestock. It's understandable, to want to blame someone or something for the death of a child, but the infant mortality rate at the time was extremely high, so we can probably chalk it up to that. It seems that grief clouded the minds of the townsfolk, though. On August 21st, 1840, when Leah was 22 years old, her parents, John and Margaret Ann Smock, left to visit the nearby town of Staples, and they took two of their three children with them. Leah stayed behind. This was the last time the family would ever see Leah Smock alive. Later that day, some neighboring men dragged Leah from her house, bound her arms and legs because they're tough shit, and carried her out to the family smokehouse. The men reportedly felt justified in their actions as they struck a match and set the smokehouse on fire with Leah inside it. She is the only person known to have been burnt as a witch in the United States. Salem witches were hanged or stoned to death. They were not burned. That's a misconception. I thought that too. I knew they were hanged and stoned, but I was like, oh, there's got to be burning in there too. Apparently not. Leah also had the dubious honor of being the first witch burned in Kentucky, but her story doesn't end there. And I say the first witch, there were a couple of other purported urban legends. I couldn't find any documentation on the people actually existing, but there are some urban legends about other women in Kentucky being witches and being burned. Couldn't find the documentation, so I'm not going to put that in there. Soon after her murder, word began to spread that Leah had returned. Her ghost had been spotted in the Lapland woods, but the first person who was reported to see her ghost was her own mother. Margaret Ann Smock is believed to have watched the smokehouse burn with her daughter inside and confirmed the rumors of her ghost being sighted the next day. Margaret said her daughter's ghost was floating above the charred ruins of the smokehouse, and she asked why she didn't use her powers to save herself, but Leah didn't answer. And maybe because she wasn't actually a witch. Her remains were transported to the newly established Elizabeth Daily Cemetery because no churchyard would allow a witch to be buried on their land. A few weeks after her death, the same men who were responsible for it grew afraid of what they had set loose in their town as reports of her ghost continued. The murderous men covered her grave with 2 wagons full of pure white sandstone in an attempt to bind Leah to her grave. And all I got to say to that is, you maybe didn't burn a witch, but you did murder someone. So yeah, I should hope that her ghost haunts you and fucks with you. That is what you deserve. It's said that when those responsible for her death saw her ghost, Leah cast them a knowing glare. At first, she was really only seen around her grave, but as time went by, she was seen more frequently roaming the woods that she loved in life. She is still seen wearing a white gown surrounded by a purple haze with ropes tied around her waist, neck, and wrists. Leah's ghost has been seen many times, and people who visit her grave sometimes become confused and cannot find the way back to their cars. The walk to the cemetery is a long and hard one of about a mile or more. And really, it's almost as if, those who buried her wanted to make it difficult to find her grave. Beyond seeing Leah's specter, there are other signs that her spirit remains. Visitors have reported finding Cooper's tools on her grave because, you see, her father made barrels and she would help him using, you guessed it, Cooper's tools. Leah is also said to protect the woods near her grave. She really loved animals. In the area seemed to be unable to hit game and sometimes see her. Again, Leah had a love of animals and a way with them. She could supposedly control them, causing even the gentlest dogs to bite. And it was said that her love of animals also caused, and still causes, hunters to miss their marks. She seems to be in full control these days, as her gravestone is hidden way off back in the woods, guarded by poisonous snakes. You remember the walking stick with the head of the snake. She occasionally appears majestically in her white robe with dark eyes and long raven tresses surrounded by that purple haze. The town of Brandenburg in Meade County hosts an annual Battletown Witch Festival that celebrates the complicated and tragic life of Leah Smock on the last Saturday of October, which I did attend. So what can we learn from this tragedy? Well, for one, don't fall prey to mass hysteria. If bad things happen around you, there are probably explanations for them that aren't supernatural, many of which she was trying to warn her town about. And they're like, what? A reasonable explanation for these things? Witch. Do I personally think that Leah Smock was a witch? Well, it depends on your definition of a witch. A great deal of women who were accused of witchcraft were herbalists and midwives. I did the Appalachian Granny Magic or Granny Witch episodes. That's a lot what it was about. And those traditions were passed down by Cherokee people, just like they were passed to Leah. Like I said, I did that in-depth analysis of witches in a previous episode if you want to check it out. But I think Leah fell into the category of a curious woman who was smart, who was open to learning about other cultures and ways of thinking. Being an intelligent woman back then was not a good thing. You know, it intimidated the small-minded locals, and it gave them a reason to target her. And I think that's certainly what happened to Leah. And I'm sure having a Native American friend was another strike against her, because most people thought tribes held some sort of mystical or evil powers. You know, Cherokee people knew how to use the local flora and fauna to their advantage for medicine and healing and things of that nature. And Jo taught Leah how to do that. She tried to warn the town about sick animals and children, but that backfired in the worst possible way. And I think if she were a witch, she'd be more of a Wiccan, like a naturalist, and not like a stereotypical devil worshipping, baby eating witch. So if she was a witch, I don't think she was like putting a label on herself like, I'm a witch, I'm in league with the devil, yada yada. She was like, I have a friend who, through his culture, practices, you know, ancient herbal healing methods, and I would like to learn them. Potentially to be, maybe she was thinking about being a midwife. Who knows? But again, we know that in a lot of witch trials, midwives were burned or killed, executed, or accused of witchcraft because they were putting doctors, who were, of course, men, out of business. They knew more. What the hell did a man know about delivering a baby in the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, barely even 20th centuries? Really? What did they know about it? They didn't know one damn thing. How could they? Like, women have only been here. I'm going to start. No, I'm not going to get on a patriarchy rant. We're not going to do this today. I do this every day. I don't want to round myself up. But all that to say, it was very clear that a lot of women who were midwives and herbalists and healers were executed as witches or accused of witchcraft because they threatened the money making of male doctors. Because of course a woman couldn't be a doctor back in those days. And even still, we're like woman doctor, female doctor, never just like doctor, and not specify, not gender a fucking occupation. Like female attorney. Do you ever say male attorney? WNBA. Well, okay. MNBA. Men's NBA, women's NBA. Like, why? I understand that the NBA started first, but why do we need to label it the WNBA? Can you just call it also the NBA and it's women playing? I don't know. I got a lot of issues with things like that. And it's strange to me that the year is 2024 and we're still talking about these things. I feel like we're just a hop, skip, and a jump away from being right back into the witchcraft accusation times and, you know, smart women being rounded up. I'm not saying it's going to get to that, but hopefully it doesn't, because I'll have to start pretending to be real stupid. A lot of us will. All of that to say, I think this woman was just straight up murdered. She was murdered, no matter how you slice it. There was no trial. There was no formal accusation. There was nothing. These cowards waited until her parents left the house, dragged her out. A big group of them. Oh, you're tough. Big group of them dragged her out, tied her up, and burned her in her family's own smokehouse. I'm sorry, why didn't these men face consequences? They murdered someone. So if I feel like murdering someone, do I say they're a witch and then set them on fire and I get off scot-free? Is that how it works? And I know you're going to say like different times. It was the 1800s, mid-late 1800s. This wasn't, you know, the 1600s, the 1700s. This is close to the 20th century. And these men faced nothing whatsoever. They just burned her and got away with it. They murdered someone and got away with it. Again, due process of the law was a thing back then. It existed. They bypassed that completely, made themselves judge, jury, and literal executioner just because a woman like knew that a horse and a baby were ill, and that's it. That's all. She knew a horse and a baby were ill. They did die. She tried to warn them something was wrong with them. And they were like, oh, well, she caused it and she controls the crop too. And that syphilis, I think she cursed me with it. No, I didn't cheat on you. Charlene is that witch. She cursed me with this itchy disease. I don't know what syphilis does. Drives you insane. I know if it doesn't get treated, but I don't know like the regular symptoms for it because I don't sit around studying old-timey STIs or STDs. All that to say.
It's intermission time, folks. I'm your host, Mr. Edward October. I'm here, thanks to the miracle of radio, with longtime friend of the show, Carissa Vikis. You may remember her as a guest narrator on episodes like Octoberpod's Guide to Fishing or Phantom of the Viceroy Drive-In. She recently voiced the role of Dr. Beltane on our Future Haunts episode. Welcome, Carissa. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Hey, Ed. Always a pleasure to be back on Octoberpod. I feel like we're kind of due for a little horror meets beauty chaos.
Your show, Beauty Unlocked, is unlike anything else out there. It seems to me to reside in a Venn diagram where the genres of beauty and self-improvement, weird history, feminist commentary, and horror overlap. And from Halloween through Christmas, it's usually a straight-up horror program. How did you arrive at this format? Did you set out to blend these disparate genres together, or did it happen organically?
Honestly, I didn't sit down one day and go, okay, I'm gonna make a podcast that's part beauty, part horror, and sprinkled with feminist rage. It kind of happened on its own. It's a little chaotic, messy, especially the first couple of years because I was still getting used to creating a podcast. I feel like the podcast is a reflection of me. I'm a bit messy and chaotic, and I am full of rage because of the state of the world. It's an absolute mess. I started Beauty Unlocked because I was fascinated and honestly disturbed by the lengths people have gone in the name of beauty, both historically and today. I was reading about things like lead makeup, nibbling on arsenic wafers, or contracting TB to fit a particular beauty standard and went, this is horrifying. And then I realized these aren't just weird old practices. This obsession with beauty, especially for women, is a kind of body horror that's still alive and well. The horror angle just made sense. I'm a big fan of horror and psychological thrillers, and I just threw in the weird history stuff because who doesn't love a little bit of weird history? And once I started digging, I couldn't stop, and somehow it all kind of fused into this little show that I now lovingly call Beauty Unlocked.
I think it's safe to assume that you see a connection between horror, either in fiction or in real life, and the struggle to live up to sometimes impossible beauty standards that people, especially women, have dealt with all throughout history.
Beauty standards have always been monstrous, but they're also a form of control. When you tell people, especially women, that their worth is tied to how they look, you keep them distracted, anxious, compliant. It's a quiet kind of violence. It's body horror dressed up as self-improvement. Women were literally dying from lead makeup or swallowing tapeworms in the past, and now we're slicing, injecting, and filtering ourselves into submission. The tools have changed, but the message hasn't. You're not enough. Fix yourself. So yeah, horror and beauty, deeply connected, especially when the monster is the standard itself.
Now, the horror genre is filled with examples of outsiders. Characters who live on the outside of what society considers beautiful or proper. I'm thinking of characters like the Frankenstein monster or the Phantom of the Opera. Do you identify with outsiders like these?
No, 100%. I've always loved horror because it gives voice to the ones who don't fit in. The monster under the bed, the woman who's too much. I mean, when I was younger and watching Disney movies, I always rooted for people like Maleficent. I think a lot of us see ourselves in those so-called monsters. They're not always evil. I mean, clearly it depends on the movie, but they're just pushed to the edge. And honestly, sometimes they're the only ones telling the truth.
Now, do you see any new trends today amongst beauty and lifestyle influencers, for example, that might demonize certain people for their appearance or beauty and hygiene habits?
Absolutely. There's this rise in clean girl aesthetics and hyper-curated lifestyles that quietly shame anyone who doesn't or can't fit into that mold. Like you're either effortlessly glowing with perfect skin, minimalist clothes, and a $90 lip oil, or you're seen as dirty, lazy, or unhygienic. It's classist, it's ableist, and it's absolutely exhausting. And influencers might not realize they're enforcing this, but a lot of beauty content comes with these unspoken rules about what bodies deserve praise and visibility. It draws this line between acceptable and unacceptable femininity, and the more you scroll, the more rigid it gets. What's even more disturbing is how some of these trends quietly bleed into the alt-right pipeline. You start off watching tutorials for soft makeup or clean girl morning routines, and suddenly the algorithm is nudging you towards trad wife content, hyper-feminine submission rhetoric, or videos glorifying outdated gender roles, all wrapped in soft lighting and acoustic music. I mean, give me a break. It's like aesthetic fascism with a filter, using beauty as a way to promote conformity and control. And a lot of people, especially young women and girls, don't even realize it's happening because it looks so harmless. I come across that kind of content, and my first thought is, get fucked. I think one of the solutions is to make space for people in larger bodies, people with disabilities, for neurodivergent people, for trans and gender non-conforming folks, and for older aging people. I'm happy that there are more content creators that are spreading awareness and the message, but we definitely need more, not less.
What would you say is the most harmful or dangerous beauty trend making the rounds today?
Honestly, anything marketed as natural, that's not regulated. Homemade skin bleaching, DIY filler hacks, vaginal steaming. There's so much pseudoscience going around TikTok and actually all other social media platforms, it's terrifying. People are risking their health because of this pressure to hack their way to beauty. And the wildest part? A lot of these trends are rooted in shame, especially shame around aging, body hair, or just being human. We've turned self-hatred into a wellness aesthetic. That's horror.
Changing gears a bit, your show often deals with mythological creatures and cryptids. Do you have a favorite cryptid?
Ooh, I love this question. I haven't covered her yet, but I'm a big fan of La Llorona. Not exactly a cryptid, but she's the perfect mix of folklore, grief, and haunting beauty. I love how her story shifts depending on who's telling it. Like sometimes she's a villain, sometimes she's a victim. Always deeply tragic. But if we're going full cryptid, the Mothman has my heart. He's got wings, glowing red eyes, and may or may not be trying to warn us about impending doom. What's not to love?
And if that statue of him is accurate, he's also got a butt that won't quit. Maybe I'll do a Mothman episode sometime. I feel like Octoberpod needs to do more cryptid content anyway.
Let's make that Mothman episode happen, Ed. He deserves it.
Before we leave, tell us where we can find you.
You can find Beauty Unlocked wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop every Thursday, and we go deep into the freaky, the fabulous, and the fucked up world of beauty. You can also follow me on TikTok at Beauty Unlocked the Pod and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Beauty Unlocked's Podcast Hour.
Folks, we have been chatting with Carissa Vikis. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
And now, friends, get comfy, because Act 2 of Octoberpod, featuring special guest host Brenda from the podcast Horrifying History, starts now.
My name is Brenda, and welcome to Horrifying History, where you will hear about the unexplained and supernatural happenings that have stained the pages of history. Churches are supposed to be places of worship and faith, but there is one church located in the U.S. state of Pennsylvania that has the reputation of being a location of insanity and death. So get comfortable, my spooky friends. You are about to hear the tale of a church that is not the sanctuary it should be, and about several more that maybe should consider doing a few exorcisms to make their grounds holy again. The earliest known church was a house church founded between 233 AD and 256 AD. Historically, these buildings represent the same things that they did all those years ago. A church building is said to be a sacrament of God reconciled with humanity. It is also a place of worship where a congregation comes to be taught and sent out to serve God. On top of this, a church represents the beliefs and traditions of the community that created it. But sometimes, churches come to represent something different, and in the case of the Egg Hill Church located in Powder Township in the American state of Pennsylvania, it represents death. But before we get into the dark urban legend that surrounds this place, we need to understand the history behind it. The historic Egg Hill Church was built in 1860, and it's a one-story banked building built out of pine on a stone foundation. Before it was built, the area was mostly settled by German immigrants, who mostly were farmers. They were able to practice their faith through a circuit-riding minister who traveled on horseback to the area. The minister would come to the township for about 6 weeks and travel from home to conduct church services in these homes. But by the 1830s, there were enough followers to build a church for. By 1838, the first evangelical log church was built on Egg Hill that was named as such due to its shape. During a meeting near the church in 1840, a tornado struck. Trees around the camp and church grounds were snapped like twigs, but during this storm, many of the camp attendees kneeled and prayed for safety. The church and camp were spared, and no one was injured. This event resulted in a massive growth for the church's congregation. By 1860, the log church was replaced by the building that stands today. This church served the community until 1927, when it was closed. The only time this church was used after this was to hold an annual homecoming service or for special events. By 1970, it was determined that the church's steeple was beyond repair, and it was removed. By 1979, the entire building was in dire need of reconstruction, and this is when the Egg Hill Conservancy was established. They had the church added to the National Register of Historical Places that same year. In 2019, it was discovered that the foundation was in very poor condition. This was replaced in 2020, and there still are several big repairs that need to happen. In current times, a new preservation group is raising funds to cover these repairs. It's now the site for weddings, special events, and its yearly homecoming service. But this church's solitude became fertile ground for tales of the macabre. Locals used to whisper about the unsettling energy surrounding the Egg Hill Church. Soon, these whispers turned into a blood-chilling legend. There are many versions of this legend, so I'll tell you the most common one. But first, let's set the scene. Through winding gravel roads and dark green forests sits the Egg Hill Church that's surrounded by battered gravestones. It sits silent as it holds the souls of dozens who were killed there through a mass murder. In the late 1800s, or in other stories the early 1900s, the pastor of the Egg Hill Church went mad. He decided to kill his congregation on Halloween night. He held a service that evening, and before this occurred, he poisoned the communion wine. At the altar of this small church, the pastor gave the poisoned offerings of Christ to his unknowing victims. As all this was going on, the children of the congregation were in the basement playing. They had no clue what was happening to their loved ones upstairs. One by one, the congregation succumbed to the poison. As they did, they started behaving like they have gone mad, or, as some say, they became possessed. Now, this is where this story takes a few turns depending on the version you hear. In one, the pastor carried all the bodies out of the Egg Hill Church, staining the floors in blood as he buried them outside. Some stories say that he went back and killed the children before he went to the top of the bell tower to end his own life by hanging. In other tales, the pastor does not poison his flock. He stabbed them all to death. After everyone arrived, the pastor allegedly chained the door shut and went on a killing spree with a knife before he hung himself. According to some of the local legends, the murder weapon was placed inside a tombstone within the church's graveyard. when it's removed from its resting place, it is said that a large pool of blood will form where the knife used to sit. On top of this, these tales say that the Egg Hill Church is haunted. Some stories say that the mad pastor still resides in his old church. Others say that it's haunted by the murdered congregation. Even others claim that it's both. But here's the problem with this, my spooky friends. Not one piece of this story is true. Like all urban legends, a dark tale never lets the facts get in the way of telling a good story. There was no newspaper that covered this event, and no documentation that talks about it. Considering what was said to have occurred there, most definitely there would be a trace of documentation somewhere. But what further solidifies this was the writings of a man named John Blair Lynn. John wrote a book called History of Center and Clinton Counties, Pennsylvania, and documented every movement that happened in this area. This story is not included in this book. Even so, this community has been suffering for years with vandals and thieves damaging and taking items like gravestones from the Egg Hill Church, its graveyard, and the surrounding properties. It's now a frequent stop for those who want to get a glimpse of the supernatural after reading about the Egg Hill Church on the internet, which has pushed this legend as if it was truth. I think that local historian BOO-tiful said it best when he spoke to the Center Daily Times for an article they printed in November of 2012. BOO said in part, and I quote, "History has enough real-life horror stories such as Auschwitz, Bosnia, and Battletown. So why make up nonsense like the Egg Hill legend? I suppose it would make a great movie with all the right elements, mad preacher shoots up congregation or some variation, if it contained any truth. But it doesn't. It never happened, period. The story is just plain garbage, and the internet psychics promoting this garbage should be ashamed of themselves." My spooky friends, where this myth started is anyone's guess, but there is a haunting here. When people go to Egg Hill Church in the darkness of night, hoping to have a paranormal experience, it is they who are actually haunting the dead, not the other way around. But there are other churches that are said to be haunted and has the history to back it up. Borley Church is located in the village of Borley in Essex, England, and it's believed to date back to the 11th century. It's a small stone building that has been added to over the years, and in its graveyard lies some very famous individuals from British history. Located near the Borley Church is its rectory. Built on Hall Road near the church, it was originally constructed back in 1862 to be the residence of the church's Reverend, Henry Dawson Ellis Bull. This rectory is not the first one to be on this site, though. The current rectory was built to replace the one that was on this site, but was destroyed by fire in 1841. It was enlarged when a wing was added to make room for Henry's 14 children. Before we move on to the spirits that are said to haunt both of these locations, I thought I would tell you about the legend that is attached to the church and the rectory. Legends tell us that a Benedictine monastery was built in this area in about 1362. One of the monks living in the monastery met a nun from a nearby convent. The two started praying alone, together, if you know what I'm saying, and when this was discovered, the monk was executed while his love was bricked up behind a wall at her convent. But just like our last tale, my spooky friends, this isn't true. This legend was debunked when it was confirmed it had absolutely no historical or factual basis. With that said, there are tales attached to both of these places that can be connected to fact. One of the most common paranormal activity connected to this church is that people regularly hear organ music when no organ is being played, and the sound of chanting when no one is around. Visitors also claim to see the spirit of a nun roaming around the churchyard along with ghostly monks. In the 1970s, Ed and Lorraine Warren came to both the church and rectory for an investigation. After learning that people would hear this church's bells ring at night when there was no one in the building, and that a ghostly monk was regularly being seen, they had to go. This spirit was said to be leaving cryptic messages on the church's walls, and the Warrens could not resist but go along with a group of photographers. During their investigations, the Warrens alleged that they found the spirit of a nun in the graveyard and then again inside, walking down the aisles in prayer. But the rectory is where the best paranormal action is at. It was famously dubbed the most haunted house in England by psychic researcher Harry Price. As we previously mentioned, this place was built to be the family home for the church's reverend. It was badly damaged by fire in 1939 and was demolished in 1944. But even though this building no longer stands, ghosts are said to wander the land where it's built. The ghosts may be homeless, but they're still present. The rectory was said to be haunted from the day it was built. The first documented paranormal event occurred around 1863. People started to report hearing unexplained footsteps throughout the house. Then, on July 28, 1900, 4 of Reverend Henry Bull's daughters claimed that they seen the ghost of a nun. It was twilight, and the spirit was walking about 40 yards or 37 meters away from the house. The girls ran outside, wanting to attempt to speak to this ghostly nun, but as soon as they tried, the spirit disappeared right in front of their eyes. According to those who knew the family, this wasn't the only time that they saw this apparition. It was said that they saw this spirit on a regular basis. But this is not the only thing that people see at the Borley Rectory. Various individuals have claimed to have seen a phantom coach with 2 headless coachmen for years. Is this nun the same nun who haunts the church? Where do these headless coachmen fit into this picture? When Reverend Bull passed away in 1927, the rectory stayed empty for some time. The following year, Reverend Guy Eric Smith moved in with his wife, and it didn't take long before things started to get really weird. Not long after moving in, Mrs. Smith was cleaning out a cupboard when she found a brown paper covered package. But when she opened it, she was shocked to see inside was the skull of a young female. It was here that the activity picked up in the home, including the family hearing the servant bells ring when they were all disconnected, lights appearing in the windows when no one was home and all the lights were off, and ghostly footsteps throughout the house. Mrs. Smith later claimed that she would often see a ghostly horse-drawn carriage traveling down the nearby road at night. It was the Smiths that reached out to Harry Price, and he came to the house to investigate in June of 1929. As soon as he arrived, the paranormal activity changed. Stones and household objects were being thrown at people inside the house by unseen hands, and spirit messages were being tapped out on a frame of a mirror. As soon as Harry left, this activity stopped. This made the Smith family believe that it could have been Harry himself that was doing these activities. Even so, the activity that they experienced continued. The Smiths decided to leave Borley Rectory in July of 1929. In October of the following year, Reverend Lionel Foister moved in with his wife Marianne and their daughter Adelaide. Lionel was a cousin of Henry's, and he wrote accounts of the strange events that he and his family experienced while living in Borley Rectory. He sent these to Harry Price. Their experiences included the bell ringing that was reported by the Smith family, windows were being shattered and objects were being thrown by unseen hands, and spirits were allegedly writing on the home's walls. There also was regular poltergeist activity. But the scariest thing was what happened to young Adelaide. She would be constantly locked into her rooms without using a key. On one occasion, Adelaide told her parents that she was attacked by something horrible, so her father decided to perform an exorcism. Twice. It didn't work, and it seemed to make the spirit or spirits angrier. In his efforts to clean up the rectory, Lionel was struck by a fist-sized rock thrown by someone that no one could see. Soon, the newspaper, the Daily Mirror, heard about this spirit activity and wrote articles about this. This brought in several paranormal researchers to the site to investigate, and they all came to one conclusion: that the incidents were being either caused intentionally or unconsciously by Lionel's wife, Marianne. When questioned, Marianne claimed that she thought some of the instances were caused by Lionel, who was working with one of the paranormal researchers, while others were real paranormal phenomena. Not long after this, Marianne came clean. She admitted that she was having an affair with a man who was lodging with their family, Frank Perilous. She admitted to using the paranormal as a way to cover up her affair. It wasn't long after this that the Foysters moved out of the rectory. After the building was empty for some time, Harry Price negotiated a deal with the owners of the property to allow him to rent the rectory for a year. He recruited 48 people to come with him to the home to investigate it. One of the first things they did was pull out a Ouija board in hopes to connect with the spirits who were residing in the rectory. The first alleged connection was with a young nun who identified herself as Marie Lair. Marie said that she was a young nun from France who left her religious order to marry into one of the most well-known families of the area, the Waldegraves. She claimed that she was murdered in a building that used to be on the rectory site and thought that her body was buried in the basement of that old building or was thrown down a well. She claimed that the ghost writing on the walls of the rectory were her pleas for help. Was it her skull that Marianne found when cleaning just after the Smith family moved in? The second spirit that Harry Price's team connected with was not that nice. He identified himself as Suned Amaray and claimed that he was going to burn the rectory to the ground at 9 p.m. on March 27, 1938. He further claimed that when the rectory burned, the bones of a murdered person would be revealed. Could these bones belong to the ghostly nun? Well, March 27th came around and nothing. The rectory did not burn, but almost a year later it did. On February 27, 1939, the latest owner of Borley Rectory, Captain W.H. Gregson, was unpacking after moving in. He accidentally knocked over an oil lamp that was in the hallway, which started the building on fire. It spread quickly, and the home was severely damaged. But here's the weird thing, my spooky friends. When the insurance company investigated this fire, they concluded that this fire was no accident. They claimed that the fire was set deliberately. After this fire, Harry Price and his team decided to dig in the basement of the rectory. They found several bones that were believed to be from a young woman. These bones were given a Christian funeral and buried at a nearby churchyard. But things are not always what they seem, my spooky friends. After Harry Price died in 1948, reporter Charles Sutton made allegations that Harry faked paranormal phenomena. Charles said that when he was visiting the Borley Rectory with Harry in 1929, he was hit in the head by a large pebble. He turned around and grabbed Harry. Charles searched his coat pockets and found different-sized pebbles. In 1948, 3 of Harry's most loyal associates investigated his claims about the Borley Rectory. They published their findings in a 1953 book called The Haunting of Borley Rectory, and their conclusion was that Harry faked some of the reported phenomena. The Society for Psychical Research, otherwise known as the SPR, came in to do their own study. When completed, they produced what is called the Borley Report that contained their findings. They alleged that many of the reported phenomena was faked or due to natural causes, like rodents and the strange acoustics for the house. They also wrote that Marianne Foyster was responsible for fraudulently creating the reported phenomena, and so was Harry Price. After this was released, Marianne admitted that she never saw any spirits, and the only sound she heard was caused by the wind and the strange acoustics of the house. When people were over, Marianne would create paranormal activity as a prank. She also regularly did this to her husband too. But there is a thing here, my spooky friends. It sounds like all the stories behind this location are exactly that. Stories. But that doesn't explain how people were experiencing paranormal activity at this location since it was built. It doesn't explain away the experiences of the Bull family or some of the experiences that the Smith family had. And then there was that female skull and bones found on the site. Is this place really haunted? Perhaps we all should take a trip down and find out. Our next church is located in Dublin, Ireland, and is absolutely beautiful. By the 12th century, Dublin had become the principal settlement in Ireland, and fast forward a few centuries, it became the capital city. But before any of this happened, the Vikings decided to settle there, and they built a place of worship on the site where the St. Michan's Church stands today. In 1095, a Christian chapel was built, and then eventually it became a Catholic church. It has changed hands over the years and has undergone several renovations. Back in the 17th century, this church built a crypt, which has been preserved and expanded over the years. Since its time of construction, there have been whispers about the dead in these underground tunnels. Many claim that they hear whispering voices in the crypt, and some claim that they have been touched by ghostly hands. Underneath the church today, there are large metal doors that are chained shut. If you would go on a tour to see these, you would find the burial vaults containing the mummified remains of some of Dublin's most influential people from the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. Some of these include the Shearers brothers, who were convicted of high treason after the Irish Rebellion of 1798, and the Earl of Leitrim. But why are these bodies mummified? No one is quite sure, but it's hypothesized that it's due to the dry atmosphere in the crypts, the limestone walls, or the methane gas that leaks up from the damp ground below the vaults. Inside, you will see the coffins stacked, not in any sort of organized way. Coffins containing generations of the same family were laid on top of each other, and in time, they collapsed under the weight. The bones fell out of the coffins, and their lids fell off, which is how what is called the St. Michan's mummies came on public display. Some of the mummies are said to be around 1,000 years old. One of the legends concerning these crypts has to do with one of the bodies that rests there. It is believed that this mummy was a soldier who returned from the Crusades, and at 6.5 feet tall, he would have been a giant while he was alive. He lies with both of his legs broken and crossed under him in order to fit his body into his casket. One of his hands stands slightly in the air outside the casket. Legend says if you touch one of his fingers, whoever is brave enough to do this would have good fortune. Tour guides used to encourage visitors to do this until 2019. This is when someone stole this soldier's head. The culprit was soon caught, and the head was returned to its resting place. After this occurred, the church will not allow visitors to touch him in any way. In 2024, a man deliberately set fire to this crypt. The blaze caused devastating damage, and the water used to put it out damaged the mummies that have lay in rest here for centuries. Experts determined that the loss is irreversible, and not just for the physical remains, but for the history that they represented. 5 mummies were completely destroyed, including the soldier that we just spoke about. It is uncertain if this crypt will ever be reopened to visitors, as the church hopes that the National Museum of Ireland can attempt to salvage the damaged mummies. But in case the church allows visitors to explore the crypts again, be aware. The first thing that most individuals experience when they go down into that crypt is that the atmosphere suddenly changes to feel quite heavy. Many report hearing ghostly whispers and have the feeling that they're being watched. Some claim that they've experienced being touched by multiple unseen hands, and others say that they see ghostly apparitions standing amongst the mummies. Could it be that these vaults contain the restless spirits of the dead? If we ever get the opportunity to go into these vaults again, take a moment to listen to the mummies whispering amongst themselves about the secrets of a bygone time. These whispers will remind you that death always remains a mystery. Thank you all for listening today.
Stick around after the credits for a brief word from some of our fellow indie podcasters, creators, and friends. There may even be some bloopers, outtakes, and bonus content as well.
If you like what you hear, you can hear more episodes released every Tuesday and Friday, released on all podcast platforms. I'm on all the social medias except for X-Shitterbird. Not on that anymore. But I am on Instagram at Autumn's Oddcast. You can find and I'm also on Threads at Autumn's Oddcast, Patreon at Autumn's Oddities. As always, I appreciate you listening. And remember, if it's creepy and weird, you'll find it here.
Let us know what you think on Facebook at Horrifying History, on Instagram and Threads at Horrifying_history, on X at Horrifying HIST1, or on Blue Sky by searching for Horrifying History. If you want to get even more horrifying history, you really should check out our website. When there, You will find links to all of our social media. We also have a blog that's filled with spooky topics.
You have been listening to Octoberpod. Octoberpod is produced, edited, and directed by Edward October. The series co-producers are M.J. McAdams and Amber Jordan. Logo and banner graphics by Jessica Good. Edward October character design by Nick Calavera. Select still photography courtesy of Unsplash.com. Select music cues by Dr. Dreamchip and various other stock music and sound effects courtesy of freesound.org. Music from Bigfoot Apocalypse and Thorax, theme from Octoberpod, composed by Nico Vitesi. All other images, music, and FX cues, except where noted, are sourced from within the public domain. Follow us on YouTube at Octoberpod Home Video, on Instagram, and the app I still call Twitter at Octoberpod VHS, and on TikTok and Blue Sky at Octoberpod. Or find us and all of our links on the World Wide Web at octoberpodvhs.com. For business inquiries or story submissions, email octoberpod@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this program, we'd be very pleased if you told your friends about us. And while you're at it, write us a 5-star or equivalent review wherever you're listening. The man who spoke to you was Mr. Edward October.
Okay, Garth, we have 25 seconds to encourage people to listen to the Least Haunted podcast.
I thought you said we had 30 seconds.
That's because I had to say we only had 25 seconds. That took 5 seconds.
Okay, well, I could do 25.
Now it's 20.
Oh, we did episodes on Atlantis, the Mine Apocalypse, Headless Horse People, Stonehenge, the Kraken, Genital Magic.
Garth, we don't have enough time to list all of them.
Okay, well, so the important thing is we heavily research spooky, haunted, paranormal topics from the perspective of two skeptics in a fun podcast every other week.
Well, I do all the research.
And I listen.
Be like Garth.
Be like me.
And listen to the Least Haunted podcast.
From the heartland of America, where the Great Plains stretch far and wide, lies a region shrouded in mystery, where the unsolved and the unknown linger. Welcome to Cold Case Kansas, the true crime podcast that delves into the unsolved cases across Kansas and its surrounding states. Cold Case Kansas, seeking justice one case at a time. You can find us wherever you stream podcasts. You can also find us on TikTok, Threads, Facebook, Instagram. If it's social media, you can find us there.
I'm Dean, I'm the dad.
I'm Laura, I'm the mom.
And I'm Arthur, I'm the son.
And together we are...
Family Plot!
Plot Podcast is the best history podcast that we can make.
Like intellectual pancakes for the soul.
I've been called the cool dad you want to take a road trip with and learn about history from.
One of our listeners said listening to me was like Mom reading you a bedtime story full of cool history, and I am here for it.
And one of our reviewers called me the snarky brother they wish they had.
So join us to learn some cool stuff,
to hear some fun banter and wild tangents.
And we are unabashedly LGBTQ friendly and trans positive and supportive.
And remember,
when you listen,
you're our family.
So join us and occasionally some very cool guests
for the Family Plot Podcast.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Redo, the fan was on. I'm just going to ignore this plane. Because fuck it all. The legend, that's quite loud right here. During the intermission, I'll speak with Carissa Vikis, a podcaster who knows all about the ugly things people do for money. For money? No.